Hi, my name is Todd Mueller, and today I will be giving a presentation on John Stuart Mill. I'll give you kind of a brief background of who he is, because some of us, like myself, before I started doing this project, had no idea who he was. Never really heard of him, and as I kind of got researching and figuring out who he was and kind of the impact he had on education and some of the ideas that he had for education, I was surprised I'd never heard of him. So I'm going to start this presentation off by giving a few quick facts. J.S. Mill was born May 20th, 1806, and he was a British philosopher, political economist, and a civil servant. He had ideas about pretty much everything, anything that had to do with being a person and bettering yourself, and some of that included education, some of that included politics. He kind of had his hand in everything. John Stuart Mill had a couple of different ideas about education. I'm going to run through three ideas that he possessed, and then later on I'll talk about the impact that those ideas had on education then and also now. So one of the ideas that John had about education was that it was required by law, that in order to make sure everyone got an education was the easiest way to do it. There's a law that says you got to go to school, you got to get an education. One of the second ideas that he had was that the state was to see that this law was respected. So it wasn't just putting all the onus on the parents. It was, no, we're going to have the state mandate that you go to school, and one of the ways that we're going to mandate this is we're going to give you exams. We're going to give you examinations to kind of make sure that you are learning what you are supposed to be learning. It's not just, hey, everyone is in school, great. No, it's now are you learning what you're supposed to be learning. And if the students did not pass those exams, the parents would then be taxed to raise money for their continued education. So this put the onus on the state, but then if the student wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing, it put the onus on the parents. So it kind of two-pronged approach to where if you didn't want to pay more taxes as a parent for your child's education, maybe you invested in them a little bit more to make sure they were passing those exams. And the third and final idea that he had about education was that each child had a right to education. This was kind of out there for the day, because a lot of people, thought that only there was a hierarchy for education, and if you didn't meet a certain requirement as far as wealth or as far as just intellectual capacity, that you didn't have a right to education, that you were going to be working, you were going to be in the working class, and that the education system was not for you. Some of the impacts that John Stuart Mill had on education relate directly to the ideas that I just kind of outlined. Some of the impacts that he's had with the law saying that you have to get an education, and that you have to go to school. So I live in the state of Missouri. I work for a public school system in the state of Missouri, and the state of Missouri requires that you go to school. And if you miss 8 or more days in a row, the school district actually has to call Department of Family Services, and they perform wellness checks, and just to make sure everything's okay, and really helps the child have a voice when if they're missing that much school. A lot of times they don't. Number two, with regards to his educational idea that the state would provide a system of exams, and if they don't pass the exams, then the parents have to pay for the continued education. This is similar to what kind of happens now. So the school districts receive grant money every year based on test scores, right? So if the test scores are not where they should be, if they don't reach a certain level, the school districts do not receive as much money from the state. These school districts rely on the money from the state, and if they don't get that money, a lot of times taxes are put into place in order to maintain an operating budget for that school district. So while the parents aren't paying up front for that education, if there's if their child does not pass the test, in turn they kind of are paying for it because taxes can be raised, and so they're paying more money on their taxes so they can send their kids to school there. And finally, his third educational impact was that he was an early proponent of education for all. Each child has a right to education. Working in special education like I do on a daily basis, this really hit near and dear to me because for many years, and many years even after John Stuart Mill had passed, education was not for all. Education was not for those that were marked disabled. So, the fact that he was willing to kind of put his name out there and say, no, like, education is for all. We really need to empower everybody through learning and through spending time with each other and the relationships that can be built through education. So that was really near and dear to my heart, and an impact that I see every single day. And finally, I will go over John Stuart Mill's critiques. So I'll do an outside critique, and then I'll also give my own personal critique. So the outside critique from many of his critics was that he was inconsistent. He had a few different theories that seemed to clash with each other. One of the major theories that he had was, while he promoted self-improvement as far as being a human, he also had many elitist tendencies. So the fact that, yeah, that's great that you made yourself better, but you're still never going to reach my level, or you're still never going to reach the level of being an elitist. There's a certain cap that you can go to. He did kind of place his hierarchy on intellect, and he advocated diversity, yet doubted that those of the middle or working class had much to contribute to advancement of humanity. And so that was a major critique of his peers. My own personal critique is that, yes, while he did believe in humans bettering themselves, and it was often for his gain. So when he wanted people to better themselves, it was so he can get so there's a better economy. Well, when there's a better economy, him being an economist and working for the East India Trade Company, like, he's going to make more money. So part of it was selfish. So that's my biggest critique. I read a lot of backstory with him, and he wanted society to be useful. I say useful to him. So everything was kind of for his gain. One can kind of say that as long as he's looking out for other people, is it really being that selfish? I don't know, but I think if he really wanted humans to be better for themselves, he wouldn't be just looking out for himself. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation, and I hope you learned as much as I did.